Hi, this is Dandan at DG Recruit. We are so excited to feature Matt Abbasfard, who is a recruiter, and he's going to share with us his story of how he found recruitment as a career and what he is planning to do with this profession moving forward. Welcome to Recruiter Prep feature interview, Matt.
Hey, Dandan, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
First things first, how did you fall into recruiting? How did you find this career?
That's a long story, but I'll try to keep it brief. I know a lot of people who recruit, maybe you had a similar experience, that had kind of a random circuitous route. We didn't go to school to be recruiters. We just kind of ended up here and said, wow, this is actually awesome. I'm going to stay here forever. So I had a similar experience. I was trying to get into a grad school program. I went back to school late and I didn't get into the program. And I thought my whole life was over. I was mortified. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had done a lot of sales in my early 20s. Right now I'm 34 and I've been recruiting for about 4 years. So in my early 20s, I did sales and said, I guess I'm doing sales again. And through a random set of circumstances, a friend of mine got hired here and he pitched me on the idea to be a recruiter. And I said, I have no interest in doing that. I don't know what that is. It's a double-ended sale. I don't want to be a headhunter. And he said, please just come and meet some of these people at a party. So I went and everybody was about my age, or, not to be ageist, but mid-20s to 35. I was about that age. They were happy, successful. They made significantly more money than me. They liked what they did. They were all friends. I had never been part of a company where people were actually wanting to hang out with their coworkers. Most of my Christmas parties were things to be avoided. So I was excited and I interviewed and I got the job, and it's been the best thing that ever happened to me. And now I'm so glad I didn't get into grad school.
That sounds so fateful and very common. A lot of people break into recruiting through a referral from friends. So that's awesome that you knew people and clearly hang out, birds of a feather, that introduce you to the business. So you said you did some sales jobs before. How would you contrast recruiting, which is a sales job, with those other sales jobs? What kind of made this one special?
So I had done I did auto warranty sales before they were a meme. So I did those in my early 20s. I did a lot of call center style sales, trying to sell SEO and online marketing. It wasn't a sophisticated sales job. It was a call center, smile and dial, however you would describe that kind of job. Probably very different than, say, tech sales. Was a very different type of job. So I guess I would say it's very different, but the only similarities, or the best similarities, is it taught me how to be comfortable on the phone, hustle, and maybe I already had some of that hustle in me, but it got me used to hustling, smiling, dialing, making a lot of phone calls, being comfortable and confident on the phone. I think that's something a lot of people struggle with in the beginning. And just getting used to being a salesperson, whatever that means.
Absolutely. And you're right. It is a smile and it is a dial. It's all of those things. And people can feel it. They can definitely feel the smiling on the phone. So it's great training for this role. And I'm always curious. So you were trying to get this academic, to progress in this grad school program. Now looking back on it, how do you think that path would have changed your life versus this path that ended up changing your life? When you look back, are you like dodged a bullet? Can you share with us how you look at that, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I 100% dodged a bullet. That's not to say that's typical for other people's experience, but as a salesperson, I was pursuing a career in data analysis, where I'd be wearing headphones, doing something called industrial organizational psychology. A lot of data and statistics applied to the business to help the business save and make money. And I am terrible in math. And the reason I didn't get in is because I scored poorly on the quantitative portion. So knowing that, why was I pursuing a career in data analysis and statistics? It's a terrible career for someone like me. That was the path that I was on at the time. And that's what I thought the best next step was. So it's not knocking that or grad school. It wouldn't be a good fit for me personally. And I think I found something that was such a good fit for me and my personality.
Right. And now that's actually a great segue into, what do you think kind of recruitment is cut out for the specific type of people? Like, what do you think, knowing, having gone through that experience, kind of looking at the fit, how would you say recruiting fits into certain types of people or characteristics that a good recruiter may have?
Yeah, I mean, similar to other sales jobs, I would say you have to be likable, you have to be organized, and you have to hustle and work hard and like a job where you're making a lot of phone calls, talking to strangers all the time, spinning plates, being personable. And I don't think the job is terribly difficult. It takes a specific type of person, but I think you only have to know how to do 5 to 10 things and do them very well. And if you're cut out to be on the phone all day long, talk to strangers, hey everybody, how are you? So nice to meet you. And if you can do some stuff like that, and you don't mind getting rejection, you don't mind things blowing up, and you don't mind doing 30 things all at the same time, you could make a lot of money, and you could have a very viable career source. Where I'm working from home right now. I have sweatpants on under this. I never visit my clients. I never leave the house, and I work pretty standard 8 to 5 hours. So it's a good gig if you can do it.
Sounds great. And obviously, being that you've been in the game for a while now and you've worked at a large agency, what kind of people do you think you would give a word of caution? Because a lot of people taking the recruiter prep course, they're thinking about, oh, all sounds great. I think I am that person. Yeah. And we're all humans naturally, we want to believe in the best about ourselves. But what would you really caution against that you see, wow, if you are a type of person that tends to do X, Y, and Z, you really shouldn't potentially not do this job? What do you have to say on that front?
That's a good question. I'm almost scared to answer because I'm thinking of all the exceptions to my own rules of people I know while I'm telling you this. I think people who aren't good with rejection or don't think they can do good with rejection, I think nobody is good with rejection. You just have to learn how to do it. But people who don't get overly concerned with rejection, people who don't take a lot of that personally, there will be a lot of rejection and you will lose often. And you just have to get used to it and win more than you lose, not lay in bed more than the average person and think about everything that went wrong. You have to get used to a little bit of rejection. And I think you also have to be, which I kind of said, just very comfortable talking to people, being on the phone, interacting with strangers, maybe very comfortable multitasking. I feel like all I do all day is 10 different things all at the same time. And if that kind of job where you're being rejected, you're talking to strangers and you're constantly multitasking sounds overwhelming or scary, then maybe it's not the best fit. But if it doesn't, and you think, well, maybe I can learn how to do that, it could be a great fit.
Absolutely. And I can't agree more. I mean, you mentioned rejection multiple times, and it's 100% true, because especially when you're starting out, it's the worst. It's the roughest part of the job. It's the first, 12 months. So how would you describe your first 12 months? I mean, obviously I can see the type of person you are, and you're very much cut out for sales, but how would you describe sort of the ramp up period, even with your strong sales skills? How would you describe that whole experience of getting caught up into this new type of sales in your 30s? You just hit 30, now you're learning something totally different that's unlike any other sales you did before. While similar, it's not the same. So how would you describe the first 12 months and what that was like?
It was interesting. The first quarter, I didn't do very well. I think I made 1 or 2 placements, and I was working in office at the time, and I would sit in my car at night after a 10-hour day or be driving home thinking, I can't believe I didn't get into grad school. I don't know what I'm going to do here. This isn't oh my gosh, is this a career? Did I make a mistake? But my second quarter was good. My third quarter was good. My fourth quarter was good. So it took me about a quarter, which isn't always typical. It can take significantly longer than that to really wrap my arms around what this was and understand how to do it. And after getting good at it, whatever that means, I was like, I was born to do this. There's so much I don't know, but I love this sale. I love what we're doing. I love the chase. I love the hunts. When I get an offer and I'm talking to a candidate, my leg is still shaking a little bit because I'm so excited. So I don't know if I gave you the best answer, but it was 1 quarter of being terrified. And then after that, I felt pretty good. And I felt confident that even though I wasn't where I hoped to be, I was in a pretty good place and I was pretty happy and I'd exceeded my own expectations.
That's awesome. And I'm not surprised. I mean, when you work hard and you just have the patient student mentality, it is, you can pick it up. It's not rocket science. Everyone tells you that about recruiting. So 100% the case, but it is its unique little beast it can be the best of days or the worst of days. And like you said earlier, you have to learn to ride those waves and deal with the rejection, the low points, the times you lose. So you're going to lose a lot. So, and what would you say was the hardest part about recruiting as a job? Or just like, what about it was the most difficult thing you had to get adjusted to?
The trickiest thing for me personally, so I'm a tech recruiter. Everything I do is in tech, was learning tech, learning what that means, learning the jargon, learning the words. Even as somebody who had some exposure to a very small portion of those things, it was very confusing. And I'll look back every 6 months. I look back at me 6 months ago and say, oh, I didn't know anything. Look at how much I know now. And that continues to happen. So I think for me personally, it was understanding tech, understanding what a good software engineer looked like, understanding the relevant technologies, being able to look at their experience and make inferences about what they were doing, about whether they could do a good job in the role. That just takes time. For whether you're doing technical recruiting or you're learning how to be a mechanical engineer or you're learning to speak Chinese, you just have to be in that world for a while. So that was the trickiest part for me.
100%. Yep. And then what actually helped you learn all those things? What did you have to do to acquire that knowledge?
I asked a lot of questions of a lot of people that were much better than I was and still am. And I still do that to this day. I know people that will watch, I'm taking a course on JavaScript. I'm like, don't do that. Just if you want to do it, but it's not going to help you. I had to ask a lot of questions of a lot of experienced people, and I occupied a lot of their time, and they helped me. And I had to keep a very humble attitude and say, even if I'm having a good quarter, I don't know anything, and I need to continue to ask questions, and I need to learn. And I think that mentality has been helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with you there. You don't have to do the job to recruit for the job. Like you said, asking senior people for their knowledge is the best way to learn. And yeah, you don't need to know all those little details, because at the end of the day, it's not your job to do the technical testing. Clients usually have their own processes. I guess if you're so inclined, you could do it on the free time, but it's definitely not necessary at all. Yeah, I agree with you there. It's not necessary. And let's talk a little bit about money, because you mentioned a few times now you're doing well, and this was a big opportunity that you saw your network really earn quite a decent amount of money. So both from yourself and from those around you, what have you seen the income potential to be, both on sort of the guaranteed side base, as well as, you know, how the commissions play into it?
Yeah, I mean, I could answer for me personally, or I could just talk generally. But just generally, I think, and you probably know this better than I do. You recruit recruiters, and I've worked at one firm. Our bases aren't great. Our bases are about 50 grand. It's probably a little more and a little less than that. But on the upside, a lot of our first year people that are doing well, whatever that means, they're making between 100 and 250. And then if you're doing very well, as in President's Club or higher, that's as high as it goes. If you're President's Club recruiter, first year, whatever year, you're making 250 to 400. And then I think our top couple people that are just individual contributors, they're not managing, are making 4, 5, 6. This year is a little bit inflated, but you could be making $500,000 or more. And then if you build a team and you're a successful manager, you get paid off of the people underneath you, at least at our company. And if you're a killer recruiter on your own desk and you have a killer team, there's people in leadership making $1 million. It's absolutely incredible.
Wow. And what do you think it takes for somebody to get to those levels of billing and of earning? Obviously they have to bill, but how did you kind of get to that point? Because I'm sure not every single person's making that, right? So what do you think is distinguishing those who get to that level? I mean, year one, that's a phenomenal amount. I actually didn't know that was pretty common. You know, most firms, even in year one, breaking 100 is solid, right? To break 250 in year one is extremely rare. So yeah, how do people achieve those type of numbers so soon?
I think it depends. It's such a hard question to ask. Like, what makes a good salesperson? Because the reason I'm hedging is some of our top performers are quiet people who you would meet at a party and never say, that's a salesperson. And I think I have a quintessential sales personality where I'm loud and bubbly and I talk to strangers. So I would still argue you have to be likable, whatever that means. Whatever you're selling, people have to like interacting with you. And then you have to have a good product. So if you're recruiting, your clients have to enjoy speaking with you to some degree. And you have to work very, very hard. You have to put in a lot of effort and get ramped up and then get kicked in the teeth over and over and over and over again, and be able to show up the next day after being told no for 3 months and have a good attitude, smile, and do your job. And I would imagine it's infinitely more complicated than that, but I guess if you had to break it down, that's how I would describe it.
And what does working hard look like? What does that entail? Whether it's like for the first 3 months, you work a certain amount of hours, or is it more so, how many hours are you really focused at work and like banging out phones times? Like, what would you say are the key kind of activities that you really have to extra work hard on in the first few months? Because obviously, as you get ramped up and you're senior, you don't have to work as hard as you did because you'll kind of have the spidey sense. But when you're just starting out, you don't know anything. So what would you say are the first efforts, the first things that you really have to work hard on when you first start out?
I think the focus when I first started was, and people will call it different things at different firms, but business development, marketing. Hey, my name's Matt, I'm a recruiter, I can fill your position, which is most people's least favorite part of the job because it's not recruiting, it's just cold. And depending on how your company does that or how you do it, it can be a lot of in-mails on LinkedIn, a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, a lot of text, however it is that you do that, but just active outreach all day long saying, I can help fill your positions, because without clients, I don't have anything. So I need to get some clients. And most people are probably going to ignore you or send you a rude message or probably just ignore you. So what I'm taking a long time to say is the focus is business development and marketing. And then in order to do that, you have to just do that all day long. And what we will do when we start is split jobs with a manager or somebody else at the company where I'm doing the candidate side. So they have the client and I'm doing the candidate side, and they're teaching me step by step by step by step and watching everything I'm doing. What is recruiting? How do I find a good person? What did they say they want? Did you hear what I said to them when they said this? And they're coaching me on every step of the way. So I'm kind of doing a little bit of both. I'm doing tons and tons and tons of my marketing. And then I'm also learning and training step by step with the senior person to better understand my niche, my industry, whatever it is that I'm working on.
And so in your organization, it very much is doing both pieces of the role and just doing as much of it as possible. And what about the working hours when you first started versus what it looks like now? Because you mentioned earlier, you're working sort of a regular schedule, like 8 to 5, but you're making, so much more. When you first started out, what were those hours like? Did you work on weekends? What did that look like when you first started?
Yeah, I personally didn't do a lot of work on the weekends. I just worked longer days. So instead of an 8 to 5-ish job that a lot of people work, I worked 8 to 7 or 7 to 7. So I'd come in a little bit early and stay a little bit late. Maybe on the weekend, every once in a while, I would send in-mails to either candidates or clients, but for a very insignificant portion of time. And then of course, I'm constantly checking my email like a crazy person. And if I get anything that needs to be responded to after hours, I respond to it immediately, but I don't really think that's work. I'm not working, I'm responding.
Nice. So it's very manageable as long as you're making the most out of your day. You're fully focused at work. You're investing in your skill set. You're practicing the word tracks and the different sales techniques on either the sales calls or the candidate calls, and just kind of learning through repetition.
Yeah, and to put a finer point on that, I talk to salespeople that will say, or people that will say, I'm working 80 hours a week. I'll say, I've never worked 80 hours a week in my life. I've worked, when I started here, I worked 50, 55 hours a week. And now I work about 40 hours a week. So not an excessive amount of time for the potential financial return that one can get.
Awesome. Awesome. And just, can you share with us kind of your best years, what they look like, what you're projected to make, hopefully, in the coming years as you see your career continue to progress financially?
Sure. So the first year I made 223. I still remember that number because I had made 50 grand the year before that and was like, I don't believe this is real. My second year I made a little over 500,000. My third year, I made a little under 500,000. And then as of this year, I'm at 280 something.
Wow. That's incredible. That's super inspiring. And how many people do you think, at least in your organization, are punching at that level? Is it like 50? Is it 30? You know, how many, or a percentage? I know it's probably not exact science, but how hard is it to do that? Obviously, you're someone who's done it. So it's hard to ask someone who's done it, how hard is it to do it? Because they're usually like, it wasn't that hard because I achieved it. But I don't know what you can lend to that, because I can't imagine that to be the average. But yeah.
No, it's a really good question. It's hard to answer without sounding like a jerk, right? Like, well, this is what happened for me, but I don't know if what I can tell you honestly. I guess what I can say is that there's about 300 of us. I could be off. Maybe there's 250.
Yeah.
And I think the top 10% are making that much, if not more. So that's
a lot.
Maybe a little less than that. Maybe more like the top 8 to 5%. Yeah.
That's still a decent group of people in their 20s, you know, and early 30s making that. So that's
incredible.
Phenomenal.
No, it's incredible. And a lot of us, like me, I'm somebody who floundered around at the junior college for entirely too long. And I didn't know what I was doing. And if you would have told me 4 years ago I'd be making half of this, I wouldn't have believed you. So the reason I say this is not to sound arrogant, but to sound like I feel like I invented something. This is an incredible opportunity for anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just curious, and this isn't a question that we've asked before, but why do you think there's such a lack of knowledge about this career that you had to wait till you were in your 30s to find out from a random friend that happened to do it? So, you know, if it wasn't, you know, why do you think we as a society just know nothing about this career?
I can only give you my opinion, but I think that, when I was in high school, I had a path that I would go to college, get a degree, do these things. And then people think about, if they're thinking of science, they think about engineering. Now they think about software engineering. If they don't want to do that, they're thinking of different careers that I can't think of off the top of my head. But we're kind of put in a lane, like go do this type of thing. And I don't think sales in general is on anybody's radar. It certainly wasn't on mine. When somebody told me I should do sales, I was like, I don't even know what that means. And I was in my 20s. So I think sales isn't on anybody's radar. And if sales isn't a career on somebody's radar, then certainly recruiting isn't a career on somebody's radar. And we have to just stumble into it like I did, or possibly like you did. I don't know your background that well, but it just happened.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was like an accident. I would totally agree with you on that sentiment, especially I think the marketing for certain careers are much more desirable or prestigious than other careers. And recruiter is probably one of those careers that we don't get the most prestige, but because people have no idea what this is about and how prestigious it actually is.
Dandan, I know so many people that will tell me stories and they make a ton of money, whatever that means, that are friends of mine as recruiters that will say, I went to a party, somebody asked me what I did for a living, and I said recruiter, and they like, it paints a picture. They probably think you're broke. They probably think you live with your parents. They don't have no idea what it is. And it's not everybody thinks that, but I've had so many interactions where people are like, I don't even know what that means. Do you work like for the military? Are you a military recruiter? No, nothing to do with that.
Right. Or the dreaded, are you in HR? So you're in HR. You can help me find a job. Great. Here's my CV. And it's like,
I've seen your posts. I'm not going to touch that one, but yes.
That was a bomb. That was a mine. That's awesome. No, thank you so much for sharing your story. And before we wrap up here, what are your sort of closing thoughts that you really want the new generation, the next wave of potentially people who want to be recruiters? What do you want them to know about this career? What advice do you have for them?
I think that if you want to listen to some of the stuff that we talked about earlier, and if you listen to and you identify more specifically with okay, I like people, I can hustle and I can work hard, I don't mind getting told no sometimes, and that's the type of job that I like, then I think you should look into it. If you're not happy with what you're doing. If you're happy with what you're doing, great. But if anything that you and I talked about today sounds appealing, I think it would be a very good career option, because it's certainly been a good one for me. It's certainly been a good one for you. And it's been quite literally a life-changing opportunity for me. So I would encourage anybody who's marginally interested to at least look into it and talk to some people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for contributing to that knowledge base, because it's stories like yours that really kind of put the actual theory into practice, to see people actually living and being in this profession that is so like ignored and not talked about. So for you, just sharing your journey and the achievements you've had, and I would just highlight asterisk, Matt is exceptional. I don't think everyone should expect 200 grand their first year, but clearly it is possible and people are doing it. So thank you so much for just sharing with us that it's possible and being that role model for us to aspire to. And we really, really appreciate your amazing work for the industry, as well as your knowledge base and education for our listeners. So thank you so much. More power to you. We're excited to see where you continue to fly and shatter more records.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me today.